Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're viewing this from. Today on Live with Dan, we have a very special guest, Charlotte Collins, who's a Consumer Research and Innovation Director at Ally. So, Charlotte, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I am excited to be here and chat all things research.
Awesome, awesome. No, that's great. I thought we'd get it kicked off earlier before this. We were chatting, and I didn't know you were a TV star. So, I'd like to learn a little bit more about that and hear what that's all about.
Yeah, that's the latest venture into things. I can maybe do a really quick intro before I jump into the TV show and give
Sure,
context
sure.
on what I
Yeah.
do and where I work. So I'm in consumer insights and innovation at Ally, or might refer to it as Ally Bank, since we are the nation's largest digital online bank, meaning we don't have any branches. We're also a leading auto lender. And my favorite thing is we're driven by a mission to do it right for customers, which means I feel really good about my job, that what I'm
Yeah.
doing is making sure that we're understanding customers. And so, yeah, I got an opportunity to partner on a TV show that we recently worked on. It's called Side Hustlers. Ally partnered with Roku and Hello Sunshine Production Company to bring a show to life that is centered around telling the story of women entrepreneurs who have some kind of side hustle or business idea that they're in, relatively early stages of working on. They still have a day job and they're trying to bring this side hustle to life. And we really loved that from Ally's perspective because we're centered on, helping people evolve in their financial journey and helping women, particularly who don't get as much funding in the venture capital space. I think one of the stats was something like they only get 3% of funding or something really low.
Oh, yeah. I think I've heard that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wild.
So
Yeah.
we love when we can partner and kind of help lift up people who maybe don't have the same access to things as others. And the show was really telling the women's stories and bringing Ally in as sort of a partner and a mentor. So we had a few people come on the show to help the women in their journey and guide them as they tried to achieve getting funding from some of our investor partners. So I came on to guide them in terms of how to think about really centering around their target customers and how to think about how research could help them understand their customers and target the right groups and position their brands in the best way. So it was really fun. I had never been exposed to
Yeah.
filming or TV or that industry, and it was very eye-opening.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I love how you help them through all stages. And it's nice that research gets a spotlight. Am I right? Like, that's awesome too. So I
Yeah,
think
I
oftentimes
love
it
working
gets,
for a company that really positions research at the forefront. I was just in a presentation the other day with our CEO and several key business leaders, and I was listening to many of the leaders sort of tell the story of their product lines and their product strategy, and they were echoing insights that our research team had shared with them, which is just so exciting to hear that our work is really being baked into the strategy for our key lines of business.
yeah, I mean, that's every researcher's dream, right? That, hey, the work that I'm doing, the business is actually utilizing it. So
Yeah,
that's,
totally. It's
that's,
not
that's
always
amazing.
easy, but
Yeah. Well, how did you get started in research? I'm always curious about everybody's journey. Some people fall into it, some people are born to do it. So I love to hear about your journey in research and how you got started and how you got to where you're at today.
totally. I love asking that question too, because it is often an interesting journey. And for me, it's the same kind of story. I'm 20 years into my career. So I don't think it was typical to really go into research. It was a much smaller scope,
Hmm.
20 years ago. I'd never even heard of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I have had my entire career positioned in financial services. So I started with a large national kind of traditional retail bank for the first 5 years and shifted to Ally. I've been at Ally for 15 years, so a long time. Basically, at the
Nice.
beginning of the brand, we
Yeah.
previously were just focused on the automotive industry with commercial and consumer, and expanded around 2009 to basically. We didn't want to be another bank. We wanted to be a new and different bank and do banking differently, and that was really exciting to join at that time. But my roles were really more what you might think of as traditional banking roles. I was working in the line of business, both consumer and commercial. And then
Hmm.
I had various stints in different enterprise functions, things like HR, project management. And then in the latter part of the first 10 years of my career, I was doing enterprise risk and finance type things, like really dry spreadsheets all day, a lot of processes. That okay, but I was not as intrinsically satisfied with what I was doing. I'll give you an example. My last role before I shifted to research was stress testing and capital planning, which was born out of the 2008 financial crisis. Essentially, the government developed these regulatory programs that all, especially large and mid-sized banks, have to run a lot of financial simulations, hypothetical economic dire situations or financial crises to prove and validate that the capital position and the liquidity position and the risk management can sustain a potential economic crisis. So I was on the team that was helping to like run all those simulations and develop the documentation and storytelling, and really important work, but a little bit dry.
Different kind of research, I suppose, right?
Exactly, but I can connect the dots that it was research and storytelling and talking to stakeholders just in a different context. But I was doing some soul searching, and I knew I needed to be closer to the customer, and I knew I needed something that was a little more creative around the work I was doing, a little more sort of like blue sky, blue space. Let me have some impact in different ways. And I won't belabor the nuances of how I got to research, but eventually landed on research sounds like the right space. And my first role was UX research at Ally. And I just knew this is where I need to be, when you have that feeling like, wow, I'm loving what I do day in, day out. The days fly by. I'm feeling energized and invigorated. And that's how I got here.
That's awesome. And I mean, Ally being a digital bank, right? The UX is probably a very, very important piece of the whole puzzle. So that's amazing that you fell into that and you enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, awesome. It is critical. And that was a really helpful starting phase for me to understand things like usability testing and journeys. But even in that role, I really recognized that I still wanted to go a little bigger, a little more strategic. I really enjoy personally when I can do more open-ended research and research that's even fuzzier than, the scope of a specific scenario or a specific topic. So I think that's led me to where I'm at today, which is where I'm leading research for our innovation space, as well as sort of being the qualitative subject matter expert for product and discovery and product strategy for the entire enterprise. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, the qualitative research is the side that I love too. What are some of the best practices that you found essential when you're conducting or when anyone is conducting qualitative research? I'd love to get some of those from you.
Yeah, I could talk forever about this. So let's make sure that
Okay, I'll keep you on task here.
Yeah, keep me on task. But I do think I need to expand a little bit and then circle back to answering it. So I hinted that I manage the research for our innovation studio. We call that TM Studio at Ally. And that is operated in a very collaborative fashion. So we utilize design thinking, which if anyone's not familiar with that, that's a framework for how to approach work that includes these core stages, of which are empathy, really a deep foundational empathy stage, and then defining a problem or an opportunity area that you learn out of that empathy research, and then ideating, prototype, and testing around the problem you've identified. And research is really key in all of those stages. We have a cross-functional team in our innovation studio that works in that way, and everyone works in all of those stages, no matter what their expertise is in. So even though I might be leading the research practice, everyone is doing research. They're conducting surveys, they're analyzing surveys, they're conducting qualitative interviews, analyzing those interviews. And the all hands on deck approach is really, I think, one of the secret sauces of why our innovation studio produces such great work. And so because of that, though, I'm teaching people the basics of research. So I think about this a lot, like what should I convey as the best practices for people? And the thing I continue to center on while we can get down to the nuances of what I would call like expert researchers are focused on, the root of a great qualitative interview, which is what we're doing a lot of times, is just having a conversation. Just simply have a conversation. You're going to learn. I tell everyone, you're going to go in and do this interview, but I just want you to have a conversation be engaged and listen, and I guarantee you will learn something new that will be important to the work we're producing.
Yeah, that's great.
And that can be tough for people. Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of pressure that exists on the moderator
yeah, no
to
doubt.
ask the right questions and follow the guide that's been drafted, and it's time boxed, and oh, we're really trying to make sure we get these nuggets. And I try to
Hmm.
depressurize, or I coach and guide that we should depressurize and just focus that it's a conversation.
Yeah, that's really good. I love the conversational aspect of it because I think you're right. You can learn so much just by talking to someone for 30 minutes, an hour that you wouldn't have known, right? To ask about maybe in a survey or elsewhere. So that's really interesting. I think you mentioned a little about, how your team's formatted on the innovation side. It seems to me that that cross-functional approach leads to like enhanced research outcomes. And do you have any projects or anything you can discuss around that as some examples?
Yeah, definitely. I'll talk about it in general, and then I might
Yeah,
describe
that's fine.
one product that's launched that is a testament to the success of this work. And I'll even acknowledge that I had some of my own biases and hesitations around it. And I know it's something in the industry we think about a lot, sort of allowing non-researchers to conduct research, right? It's a slippery slope, because if you have
Hmm.
bad data, that can lead to bad implementation of results.
Yeah.
But what I've really seen firsthand happen as I particularly began to manage the research program in our innovation space is that when you allow that, when you sort of open up that freedom and empowerment for everyone to get their hands in it a little bit, they connect with the insights so much more deeply, and
Hmm.
they begin to feel empowered to solve that problem or to take those insights forward.
Right.
More so than if I just did all the research and then I shared my report out. So I'm a huge proponent of, in smart ways, bringing people more collaboratively into the research process and letting them have a hand in it. So I will tell one example.
Yeah,
We
that'd be
had a
great.
project where we were partnering with our invest line of business, and we had an actual product owner within the business come in and work with us in this collaborative way, meaning that she was now going to be, doing surveys and analyzing that and conducting some of the interviews with these target consumers. And she had been in that space for many years. She was a great subject matter expert. She really knew the business and the space. But I think the target consumer that we were studying and the context around that consumer was maybe a little different than she had been exposed to. And she had these deeply held assumptions and beliefs about how people interact with investing products and platforms. And as she was conducting her first interview, I saw the change happen on her face. It was so powerful. And she would talk
Mhm.
about this later, that her beliefs and biases were just countered in one interview. It just took one interview for her to buy into this process and to really
Mhm.
get connected with these consumers that she's listening to. And then as the project evolved, she became a change agent and an evangelist for the insights and recommendations that we were making out of this body of work. And the power that held it wouldn't have existed if she hadn't been involved in this process in that very organic way. So I'm just a believer in that advocacy that comes out of bringing people who are going to be working on the work closer into the research.
Yeah, that's amazing. And one thing that it never really occurred to me is, and I think you brought this up, is that when you bring people in who aren't researchers into the process, they probably trust it more, right? They trust the data more. They buy into it. They're not, oh, this isn't some black box, and then magically the the results get spit out. There's something behind it. So I love
Mhm.
that approach that you guys are taking. That's amazing.
Yeah. And again, there's the way we're managing it to maintain the integrity of the research is there's still oversight. So, for example, I was
Hmm.
still
Yep.
reviewing every discussion guide, watching all the interviews. I can guide the analysis discussions to ensure that people don't inadvertently take a one off or, something that might not truly be an insight that we should follow on. So, it was that balance of still having robust and rigorous research guidance and oversight, but opening up the gates a little bit to make it a little more collaborative and let folks play a part in it more than they typically have in the past.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. And then you mentioned earlier about where you shared some results, and then the CEO even bought into the process and really wanted to, distribute that across the organization and implement that. Do you have any like specific strategies that you can recommend for maybe people in similar roles and how they can utilize this for actionable steps inside of their organization?
Exactly. I think it's just what I was talking about, and trying to
Yeah.
think of creative ways that you can bring your partners and your stakeholders into the process more than they might be today. So I know that not everyone can set up and operate like we do with our innovation space in terms of all hands on deck and everybody engaged. But I think I've I've tried some tips and tricks in other project work I've done that I think
Mm.
are little flavors of that. For example, you can host sessions where it's a little more interactive, collaborative way to develop discussion guide questions, or let people sit in on the interviews and hear them in real time, or watch them later and have kind of like a mini ideation session, guiding people through what they heard and sort of letting them play the role of analysis instead of the
Mm.
researchers doing all of the analysis themselves. The researcher may already be coming to the conclusions of what are the top insights we're going to hear, but letting stakeholders play a part in that can help them
Yeah.
feel more connected to the output of the work, and maybe become a change agent for it, and advocate for it more if they're a little more connected to it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So it's not, to me, it sounds like don't just bring them in at the end when you're doing the report, right? Bring them in throughout the whole process so that way they can get the feel of it. And then I think, like you said, I think they'll buy into the results a lot more because it's not just another meeting, another presentation. It's actually they were part of it and they did it. So that's really interesting. What do you think about how do you approach like immersive research and what does that, I guess, what does that mean to you? I think it's kind of a wide, definition, but I know we were kind of talking about immersive research. So I'd love to hear what you think about that and some of the benefits there.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I should ask you to help clarify what you mean by immersive research, because when I hear it, I can think a couple of different things. I can think immersive meaning we're just going to go like really deep, or immersive meaning the collaborative aspect, or maybe it's both. But maybe I should make sure I'm
Yeah, I think,
understanding.
I mean, we can go in any direction that you want. It's kind of whatever it means to you, right? That's always the
Yeah,
question. But
yeah,
I think, I think going, kind of going deep and really immersing yourself, that was more of what I was thinking, but you kind of bring up another interesting point of what it could mean. So maybe how you approach like going, really deep into solving a problem. Like, do
yeah.
you use a bunch of different methodologies? Do you just stick with one and go deep? How do you think about that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could wax poetic about methodology.
Okay.
I'm a huge advocate for mixed methods and not relying on one method to be the go-to. I mean, I think I see that as a potential trap that we fall into as researchers, because we get very skilled and trained, and we sort of can fall in love with the thing that we feel like tells a great story. For me, that's
Mhm.
qualitative. I have a deep love and passion for qualitative, but qualitative alone could have its fallacies. It's not always going to tell the whole story. It's not always
Mhm.
going to be the best method. So I'm a huge proponent of, and it's depending on the project and the timeline we have, right? But as
Mhm.
much as we can pull in different sources of truth, that for me is often secondary market research or research that already exists that we've conducted. I want us to bricolage and build on what we already know and continue to expand our body of knowledge and connect dots, instead of just looking really myopically at one topic or one project area.
Mhm.
So we're going to leverage what we already have. And then ideally, we can do mixed methods, meaning we can balance some quantitative insights from a primary research perspective, as well as some qualitative in-depth. For us, that's typically interviews, to really dig into a topic and ensure that we're not missing something on either side. I've seen it happen so many times where we analyze a survey and we feel like we're really solid on the story that's coming out of that survey, and then we have some interviews and we hear some new things that didn't come up in the survey at all, and it makes us realize, whoa,
Mm.
we missed some stuff. Or vice versa, we've done
Yeah.
some interviews and we feel like we've gotten a really set story, or we're starting to anchor around a theme, and then we try to vet that quantitatively, and it just doesn't prove out as common as we thought it would be. And
Mhm.
so I really lean on really all three of those methods: market research that exists, syndicated research that exists, plus really deeply studying the topic through quantitative and qualitative methods to feel confident about it. And ideally, then you can iterate and do more and more of it, which is how we approach our innovation
Right.
research. I'll give you an example for any given project that some of our projects might range depending on how large in scope they are from 2 months out to 8 months. For a larger one, around 6 months, we are conducting that work in 2-week sprints. So we sort of hold ourselves to this 2-week timeline, and that our output is not an idea. Our output is typically learnings in that 2 weeks. And so we're often doing research every 2 weeks. What's the new thing we need to learn? What are we curious to learn? And how is that going to move our body of work forward in terms of ultimately landing on a vetted idea that we think is a really good idea to follow? And so a 6-month project by the end, we might have maybe 15 to 20 market research or related sort of broader studies that have informed us.
Right.
Surveys that we've launched probably hit around the 5,000 responses range total in aggregate across the whole project. And we've probably talked to around 60 to 80 target consumers that are informing the work and or testing and evaluating the ideas that we're landing on, so that by the end of a project, we feel really confident that we understand the target consumer, we understand the problem we're solving, and we've vetted that it is a problem or an opportunity area on the more positive side of that, and that the idea we're presenting truly provides value and solves the problem we've identified.
Yeah, I mean, you guys really, have a lot of rigor there. I'd say between doing not only the secondary or the syndicated research, you have the qualitative and then the quantitative, and the scale of what you're doing, even in 6 months, is pretty impressive. So that's great. Wow. That's awesome.
And it's all in-house. We're doing it.
Oh, wow.
We're doing that ourselves with a team of 6 to 8 people at any given time. So it's pretty scrappy, but it proves time and time again that, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with Ally's products, but in our savings account, we have what we call buckets and boosters, where you can organize your savings into these different priorities or goals that you might have. And that work was actually originated out of our innovation space. And we translated, the business came to us. We're very tethered to business needs. We're not operating in a vacuum and just innovating for innovation's sake. We start from a business challenge, and the business challenge was how might we think about providing value to our customers for savings beyond just rate. At the time, rate was the primary reason people might choose a savings account, very commoditized. And so we flipped that into a consumer focused challenge. And that consumer focus was how are consumers saving? What's important to them? How are they using banks? How are they using other tools? And our learning was savings was actually this really emotional thing. People have these goals of a big vacation, a family, a new home, and they're doing mental math, or they've got a lot of accounts that are all over the place. And so we developed a concept that helps them organize those savings into these very intentional goals and kind of brings the emotion back into it. And to date, it's one of our, it's a really engaging product. Our customers constantly tell us they love it. I don't hear the word love in banking a lot, but it comes up with savings buckets.
You bring up a good point there for sure. That's awesome.
So that's a testament to this process working really well.
Yeah, and the buckets it makes things a lot easier, right? Just from like a ease of use, like friction standpoint from a consumer, like why do I have to open another account if I just want to like bucket this money towards? It seems like a no-brainer, but I'm sure that it's a no-brainer because we know about it now, right? So
it is, and a lot of other banks have copied that model. So we love when we're a disruptor in the industry and we start a trend.
Yeah, no doubt. One question that I like to ask researchers such as yourself is: so there's a lot of methodologies, there's a lot of tools out there today. What's one that you don't think we need anymore that can be just kind of gone? You know what I mean?
Dan, you're getting controversial now.
I'm trying, I gotta push that line a little bit.
I mean, I mentioned earlier that I think we can fall into the opposite trap where we kind of find our tools that we love and that we gravitate to. And I think that's the bigger risk, I think. So this is going to be a non-answer to your question, I think, unless something jumps in my mind, but I don't necessarily have a methodology that I've seen that I feel like no, that never fits a scenario. I think it just depends on the project and the context. And again, that amalgamation of I will always advocate lots of different methodologies coming together to tell a robust story. And so, as you know, I would say what I would throw out is having one methodology that you go to all the time and always using that to tell your story would be the thing we should do.
That's a great answer too. I mean, I love that because people do get stuck and focused on one thing. So
yeah,
no, that's
and
a great answer.
Recognizing the limitations of every given methodology. So I'll tell one example. I have worked with some practitioners that love card sorting, and I love card sorting too. And I think it has a really clear place and moment when it provides helpful insights. But I saw it being used one time for developing ideas around how to organize the navigational menus of a website. And it definitely makes sense for that. But in and of itself, it may not tell the whole story because there are visual aspects to a navigation menu that also give clues to consumers about how to wayfind. And the words in and of themselves are only one aspect to the mental models for how consumers are like organizing things in their mind. And I was really advocating to not only rely on the card sorting, but to also do a design related visual study that would ensure the navigation was really clear and making sense to people.
Got it. I know that's a good answer. I love that because it's making sure, like, you know, in a situation like card sorting, that you're applying it to the right things and with the right context. So
yeah,
I love that too. Awesome. Yeah. Well, hey, Charlotte, thanks so much for joining me today on the show. Really, really nice to have you. And thanks for answering all my questions and being such a great guest.
Yeah, Dan, this was so fun. I really appreciate it. I love, listening to these kind of things and hearing from other researchers. So I'm happy to pay it forward in this one time and hopefully had some insights that are helpful for other folks in the space.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.